Hey there, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Surviving His Sex Addiction and Betrayal show. This is my weekly show every Sunday morning. I'm Jenny Rochelle. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a betrayal trauma recovery specialist. That's a new title I'm trying out today. Seeing how it fits, feels pretty good. So what does that mean? It means that I am a life coach, a certified life coach. I'm a certified yoga teacher, and I'm also a spiritual director. I am pursuing a master's in spiritual formation at the Episcopal Seminary of the Southwest here in Austin. And also, I think maybe most importantly, I'm an ex-partner of a sex addict. So what is a betrayal trauma recovery specialist? So I support women who are trying to find hope and healing after experiencing betrayal. And that can be betrayal in all the forms that it occurs. I mean, okay, that's a very high level thing to say. What we're really talking about is affairs. One affair, multiple affairs. It could be pornography addiction. That's definitely a betrayal for many women. It could be full-blown sex addiction. Like I said, that was the case for me. My ex-husband he is now a recovering sex addict. We are no longer married. And this is my life's work, is to work with other women who went what I went through. I went through exactly, or probably not exactly, or something similar, but women trying to recover from betrayal and trying to reclaim their life, right? I know right now you feel like you've lost all control. If that's you, and right now, let's just pause for a second and just give me an amen or raise your hand in the comments if you fit one of those categories. You have been your husband has had an affair, or he has a pornography addiction, or sex addiction, or Craigslist. There's so many different ways that betrayal can occur and can be so super painful to those of us who experience. So if that's you, give me an amen or give me a wave in the comments so I kind of know who my ladies are, because you're my ladies, you're my soul sisters. It's unfortunate that we belong to that same together. But anyway, we're here now and we're together and you're no longer alone. So reclaiming your life, that's what I want to talk about today. So if you downloaded my guidebook already, if you haven't, go to www.sexaddictionguidebook.com, Surviving His Sex Addiction and Betrayal Guidebook. It's a guidebook for what I call a woman in the desert, who is a woman who has experienced betrayal and is awake and ready to deal with that and is seeking that hope and healing and trying to figure out how to reclaim her life. In that guidebook, I lay out 6 things, excuse me, that I think are critical or essential to finding your way back to who you are, from being sort of devastated in this woman in the desert to surviving and then to eventually thriving. And those 6 things are safety, sisterhood, self-regulation, the right kind of support that you need. Your spirituality is also very important. That's what we talked about last week. And this week I'm going to talk about strategy. And the tricky thing about strategy is there's so many things that you don't actually have control over right now. And if your husband is actually a sex addict, it could be that your life seems to revolve around him and his recovery. Or maybe it revolves around you trying to figure out how to keep him from cheating again or watching pornography again. And the kind of crap thing that I have to tell you, there's really no way that you can control his behavior. You can make lots of requests in terms of boundaries, and I talk about that in the guidebook. And that's sort of the safety piece of it. But ultimately, it's just you that you have control over, and the boundaries that you set for yourself are the most important ones. However, there is sort of a process that you can follow. And this is one of the things that took me a number of years to figure out. And also, like, in the area of sex addiction and betrayal trauma recovery, it's still sort of new. And the fact that partners experience such profound trauma is kind of new in terms of like how we treat these women, treat women like you. And so there is a process that you can follow, and it begins with like having the right kind of support. So in terms of like making sure that your husband has a certified sex addiction therapist, or called a CSAT, and that is working with him on his recovery. And then you need someone like you need you need a therapist who can help you, who is trained to deal with partners of sex addicts. And then also I highly, highly recommend that you get a coach too, or another support person who's trained to deal with partners of sex addicts, because like 1 hour a week with your therapist is probably not enough for you. It's probably not enough for you. And I know you probably have friends and family that maybe you can rely on, but you probably feel overwhelming to them. And the truth is you need to pay for support right now. And I know that's a hard thing, and maybe you're strapped for cash and you feel like you don't have the money, but there are lots of women who will work out there in different price ranges, lots of great support in terms of coaches. That's certainly me. That's what I do. I'm a life coach. Like I said, I'm a spiritual director. If you need some additional support right now, like that's here. That's my mission, to support you. So you need some support. And then the rest of the process is you begin with your support, and they will help you if they're informed and a good CSAT and a good coach who trained to work with partners of sex addiction. Then they will help you sort of lay out this process. And it kind of depends on where you are in your story. And every strategy, I put it in quotes, strategy is different depending on the situation. But typically, you'll have one or multiple discoveries. What I'm sort of seeing as I continue to work with women is there seems to be like an initial discovery where you figure out he has betrayed you in some way. And then you really, really, really want to forgive him because you don't want to blow up your life. And and this is totally a trauma response, by the way. Excuse me. Totally. Nobody wants to keep touching the hot stove, right? You want to forgive him. You want things to go back to normal. You don't want to break up your family. So something happens, and then you forgive him probably sooner than is probably healthy for you, and maybe without setting the right kind of boundaries in place. And then you sort of go back under, right? You sort of go back into things that are normal. And then like a year and a half, 2 years can go by. There might be a little blip of another tiny discovery. And then you're like, well, I'm not quite ready. No, well, that doesn't happen. And then finally, at some point, maybe, a year or 2 years later on down the road, there's some other major discovery. And it seems like that's when women are ready to start to deal with that, to really deal with what's going on. And it's like, there's a problem, but you don't want to blow up your life, and you just want things to be okay. And here's the thing, like you can drag that process out, and you get to do that. I certainly did that. I had initial discovery. I think it was like 3.5 years before I was ready to say, okay, this is not getting better on its own. And my continuing to forgive him is not helping me, and it's not helping him. And so then I started to follow this process, which involves like something called a disclosure, where he works with his support person to create this exhaustive list of all the things that he has done in his addiction or in his betrayal while you've been married. And he creates that with his support person. And then when you're ready, you and your support person and him and his support person, you get together in a room and you have something called a disclosure. And you really want to make sure you have your person with you for this process, because it is most often highly traumatizing, and you need to make sure you're asking the right questions. You don't want too much information. You don't want too little information. You want just the right amount of information so that you can feel like you understand what's going on. Because until you understand what's really been going on in your marriage, you can't set effective boundaries. You really can't decide whether or not you're going to stay until you have the truth. And we don't really want to know the truth, right? We don't really want to know because we know it's going to hurt, right? But like that's the thing. Ultimately, you get to the point where you need to know the truth, as scary as it is. And then you can start to make decisions about what you're going to do in terms of your marriage. And then following on the heels of that is very standard in this world for the husband to take a polygraph to make sure that he fully told the truth. Here's the thing, and polygraphs used to be more controversial than they are now. In this community, they're fairly standard fare, but it seems sort of crazy to give him a polygraph. But the thing about sex addiction is it is such a shameful disease. It is almost impossible for the addict, for your husband to tell the whole truth without like this polygraph hanging over him. It's just the truth. It's just, think about if a person, is on probation for drug addiction or alcoholism, they have blood tests. They have tests to make sure that they're accountable. And because sex addiction is so hard to spot day to day, like there needs to be this other additional tool. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's the way it is. And then if you decide that you're going to stay, continuing to have polygraphs at regular intervals throughout the next few years of his recovery, like maybe every 6 months or once a year, that's for you and your support person to figure out. Also very standard. And and that could be one of the first boundaries that you're set for yourself is, okay, you go see, you ask your husband to find the right person to support his addiction and his own recovery. You find the right person, and then you talk about, this disclosure and polygraphs, and just giving you a lot of information. Just take it one step at a time. And this is how you start to reclaim your life. And you start to reclaim your life as well. And I think this is probably the most important thing that I can say to you today, is just focusing on you. You are the only person that you can control, and how you respond and how you react. And that begins by taking care of yourself, like learning to regulate your nervous system, getting lots of sleep, going to see your doctor if you need to. Like, this is a time when you may have to reach for some medication. I'm not a doctor, but there's no shame in doing that right now. You need to be able to sleep and eat and take care of yourself. And anytime you find yourself really obsessing about what he's doing or not doing, I just ask that you try some of the grounding practices that are in my guidebook that I offer, to try to come back into your body and realize you have no control over him. And if you believe in God, this is a great time to just say, I surrender. I surrender, God. I can't fix it. You can't control it, right? And one last thing, and then I'm going to end for today, is I was listening to this great podcast a couple of weeks ago with a woman named Ellen Pagels, who wrote this book called Why God. And this is where she has a story where she had a child die, and then a year later her husband died. And she was talking about grief. And she was talking about feeling really, really guilty about what happened to both her child and her husband, and blaming herself. And then eventually she realized that it was easier to feel guilt than powerlessness. And that really resonated with me, and maybe it will resonate with you. We want to blame ourselves for what happened, but it's not your fault. But it's kind of easier to blame ourselves and to say, well, I should have had more sex, or I should have done whatever. I should have shaved my legs, shouldn't have gained 10 pounds, or should have lost the baby weight, or should have dressed sexier, shouldn't have gone after my life coaching business. I shouldn't have done all these things. It's easier to do that than to say, I have no control over what happened. It's not my fault. Here's the thing, it's not your fault. And you have no control over him or his betrayal or his addiction. You have control over you. That begins by downloading the guidebook, xoxo.guidebook.com, and beginning to create this strategy and get this support system in place for you. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the show for today. Thanks for everybody who hopped on. I certainly appreciate it. If you're watching it on the repeat, God bless you. Thank you for being here. Talk soon. Bye.